Foundation, and in particular Christine Van Gen, who wrote a piece not too long ago in the National Post when this secret deal between the Bloc and the Liberals became public by leaking Liberal sources. So I'm going to read various portions of that article into the record at this time, but I'll start off specifically about the religious defense. The title is quite interesting. Changes to Bill C-9 aren't combating hate, they're criminalizing faith. Bill C-9, the Carney government's Combating Hate Act, would expand criminal prohibitions on expression and increase penalties for speech offenses, including online speech. Now the bill may also gut the defense that protects good faith.
Can you hear me now? Okay, I'm back. No, it's just talking about how, like, Supreme Court justice, why, when they first had, created the Supreme Court, they were probably one of the most well-paying jobs you could get in the land. And it's like, how could you be bribed when there's barely anyone who's wealthier than you? Now it's like you could be just, a partner at a law firm and possibly making more money than, a Supreme Court justice. Not a lot of them, but some of them. And probably a lot more than you'd think.
Concluded that no charges were warranted. As Quebec's Director of Criminal and Penal Prosecutions put it, quote, "The evidence does not establish beyond a reasonable doubt that the words spoken constitute incitement to hatred against an identifiable group," end of quote, under Section 319 of the Criminal Code. One may argue that Zionist was just code for Jews. One may also believe that praying for death is morally abhorrent, but that decision not to charge Cherkawi, turned on the basic threshold of incitement to hatred, not on the religious defense. And even if it had invoked the defense, one inflammatory prayer at a political rally is not a justification for dismantling a safeguard that protects millions of Canadians from state intrusion into matters of faith. The religious defense has also been essential to the constitutionality of the hate speech prohibition itself. We've all been talking about the Keegstra decision at numerous times throughout this particular study. The Supreme Court wrote that the offense is a minimal impairment on the right to freedom of expression, in part because of the very presence of Section 319 sub 3 defenses, which includes the religious defense. The courts upheld the law because the religious exemption exists. Remove it, and the constitutional floor collapses. But even beyond constitutional risk, removing the defense is a profound moral and civil liberty mistake. We should not want, let alone empower, prosecutors to criminalize any form of prayer. Religious texts across traditions contain pleas for justice against enemies, metaphors for divine retribution, and expressions of anguish, symbolism, and cosmic struggle. That is not the realm of police. If the state begins parsing psalms or hadiths line by line in a courtroom, then we have forgotten why the Charter exists at all. In practice, the
Damn it. Oh yeah, no, the point I was making was that like when you said like I think they're the it's called the good faith religious defense. And it's like I think the good faith part does a lot of heavy lifting there. Oh, Gould not running. Did she make an announcement online?
As a Trojan horse to carry the intended message of hate forbidden by Section 319. Religious expression is messy, symbolic, and deeply human. It concerns the nature of justice, suffering, good and evil, the most intimate dimensions of identity and conscience. These are precisely the areas where the criminal law
good old
must
Nate.
not trend. We do not want the government
The
parsing
breaking
religious
news.
texts or religious speech, especially given that most of our political leaders are absolutely ignorant of religion, including in some cases
Oh, okay.
their own
CTV
religion.
broke it.
For example, and Mr. Lawton got into this, in a shocking display at the Justice Committee, former Liberal Chair Mark Miller claimed to Derek Ross, Executive Director of the Christian Legal Fellowship, that portions of the Bible are hateful. Miller then doubled down on X.
Do we have to watch the West Wing clip? Like the West Wing, like there's some not some great stuff in the Bronze Age book that they cobbled together at Nicaea. There's some outdated thinking, verging on hateful.
Most violent instrument. Let that sink in. It should not be swung at the human soul. The Bible is the most banned book in history precisely because it is powerful and points to an authority beyond the...
I listen back to those all the time. I love because I also do, in my heart of hearts, enjoy watching The West Wing and Newsroom. I will admit it. I enjoy news. I've never actually seen Studio 60 on Sunset Strip, and it's like, you can't, there's no way I'm gonna be able to buy that, like, making a sketch show is important enough to society to justify Sorkin's whole thing in every show he writes. So I just listen to the Chapo one.
A government that fears religious speech is not fighting extremism, it's fighting competition. And what better way to summarize the actions of this liberal government over the last long 10 years?
I think God does a lot of exterminating in the Old Testament. I mean, that's what the flood was.
Years. The proposed amendment to Bill C-9 would take Canada down a dark path. We should never have criminalized belief in the first place. Strip away the religious defense, and Canada will not be combating hate. It will be criminalizing faith. The defense must be maintained.
Point
of order, Mr. Fortin. Mr. Chairman, I don't know what the rules are, but
I mean, that's what that's what Thanos said.
Deal of respect.
Spiani.
Going to be taking up our time.
Still did it. The Saturday Night movie about the first SNL was decent, but Jesus Christ, there were too many. We were scrappy underdogs, heartful speeches, at least two.
Apart from
did Sorkin help write that one, the SNL one?
Well, I understand that my amendment does not suit the Conservatives, but I think that a minimum of respect
I feel like my hair looks
and
insane.
will allow me to work. Thank you, Mr.
Oh, okay.
Chair.
So is your objection to them sitting at the table or to the comments he was making?
Make any comments.
Mr. Fortin?
I would ask Mr. Chair if you could do what is necessary and perhaps ask our colleagues to sit somewhere else and not come and sit right here.
I mean, is there...
What is happening?
Is there no rule or regulation on the number of people? Because these Conservative colleagues, you know, if they all wanted to sit here, well...
Oh, there's just a bunch of them just, like, stacking the deck.
And your colleague neither.
I think maybe,
Ben non, mais je comprends.
Mr.
mais
Ooh.
les membres
Okay,
du
okay.
comité-
It's not even 8
understand
p.m.
that
It's gonna
member
get
of the committee-
spicy tonight. I love it.
Members of Parliament are entitled to sit around this table, but I would request that those of you sitting near Mr. Fortin show him some courtesy and respect and allow him some space so that he does have room to.
I feel like isn't there a rule about like you can't like
If I may.
aren't you only supposed to have so many seats at a
I made no comments to the member. I sat down.
I don't.
how many of them are there?
As you said, members are entitled to sit here. How
One,
many
two,
does
three.
My colleague need for his work. If he could establish that, this was an open chair. I don't see the being in an open chair.
There's so many conservative. Oh,
I don't. I didn't raise this discussion. Work. If he
just
could
the
establish
staffer in the
this was an open
background.
chair, I don't see the problem with sitting in an open chair.
Really, that's the discussion you want to have? Okay.
I don't. I didn't raise this discussion.
Okay. I was hoping we could.
To see how terrible this bill is.
This is gonna go great.
Because
I'm
if
so
this is the
excited for
price
tonight.
that the Liberals had to pay in order to get this bill passed, then they truly understand how difficult it was, and for good reason. This bill has received an extraordinary amount of attention, and it will continue to do so, particularly because of what's happening right now. I really don't get it. We had such interest in this bill. We had so many witnesses that wanted to speak to it. We had 2 meetings canceled by the Liberals in time when we could have heard from witnesses. Now, fast forward, and we're making a fundamental change. Continues to see the
Okay.
impact. Thank you.
I don't know what happened there.
Monsieur Fotan, I heard you say in your remarks that the reason you're bringing this amendment is because of Adil Charkawi and his pronouncements in Montreal. Did I hear you correctly?
No, I said it's an example, a good example.
It's a good example. But I would suggest to you respectfully that it's not a good example. We have, again, I very much respect your professional.
Oh yeah, that one. I think that was just like the
and I think
thing with
we
the
should be
internet.
entitled to ask each
OBS
other
didn't crash.
to be professionally frank. I'm going to refer you to a CBC article. All right? I think the other side likes the CBC. Posted on May 17th, 2024. Crown won't file charges over controversial pro-Palestinian speeches in Montreal. I will endeavor to send you a copy of this article, Mr. Fontaine. Scroll through, and the article states, the Crown said the statements analyzed must target an identifiable group as defined in Section 318, Sub 4, namely, any section of the public distinguished by color, race, religion, national or ethnic origin, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression or mental or physical disability. Under the circumstances, the provisions of the Criminal Code do not allow for charges to be laid in this case, the Crown says. The DPCP concludes that the evidence does not establish beyond a reasonable doubt that the words spoken constitute incitement to hatred against an identifiable group within the meaning of the applicable Criminal Code provision, given the interpretation thereof by the courts. The Crown's news release says. Clearly, the Crown said publicly that it's not the religious defense that saved Mr. Charkawi, but that the elements of the offense were not met, in that he did not call for the killing of an identifiable group of people. So I'm wondering why, if the Bloc truly believes in this amendment, do they need to be so aggressive on these facts that they tender, that do not bear out, Mr. Fortin, with respect?
I would not have expected to hear Rowan Baber make the actually Charkawi didn't mean, well, I guess he's not making that argument. He's saying that that's what the Supreme Court ruled. In fairness, He's just saying that that's what the Supreme Court ruled in fairness. So that makes more sense.
Acquit and accused. This has never happened. We're dealing with a defense that has never been successfully argued. But the challenge with it, as the challenge with all hate law reforms, is that when we lower the threshold, when we start going down the road of criminalizing more and more speech, we create a chill on free speech because we may place folks in a situation where they do not know if they are offending the law or not. They may be at legal jeopardy. You see, when Mr. Miller says portions of the Bible are hateful, then what am I to make of that? How do I know now what would be hateful? Maybe one of them might be more hateful than another. The point of this discussion is not even the fact that religious people may face prosecution because this defense does not exist. The point is that removing this defense in and of its own may chill religious speech. We should not be entering a zone where folks are in legal, may feel that they may be in legal jeopardy. I learned a lot since I was elected. I was elected in April 2025. I previously served as a provincial member. There is no a Bloc Québécois party in Ontario's parliament. And I've learned a lot about our country, about bilingualism, about French Canada, about our conventions, about your culture. And we respect each other immensely. And I respect your proposition.
You had to wait till you got to federal parliament to learn about
honor
Quebec?
The laicity of the state. I get it. But laicity of the state is laicity of the state, not of everyday Canadians. And to force them to potentially fear for quoting religious scripture is definitely not something that state should engage in.
Well, I think they say they would say they represent the French. They are the defenders. They are the guardians of French in Canada, both the language and the people. But I think they would say they represent Quebec. Though the other parties with MPs in Quebec would also quibble with that. But I think more it's in the name.
The one dealing with advocating genocide. The example
They represent Quebec as the
used
nation within a
in
nation,
this room,
Quebec.
in the House, is someone calling for genocide, someone calling to exterminate the Jews or anyone else. But the religious defense does not apply to Section 318. It's not found in the section. You advocate genocide, there's a definition of genocide, there's consent of the Attorney General, and there's a definition of identifiable group. No defense. The situation we're discussing does not arise. All right, let's go to Section 319. It's the hate speech section. We have two operative sections in Section 319. We have the first one, where someone incites hatred against any identifiable group, where such incitement is likely to lead to breach of the peace. All right, so identifiable group, breach of the peace. And the second one, willful promotion of hatred. That's the classic one we're familiar with. Everyone who communicates statements other than in private conversation willfully promotes hatred against an identifiable group of people. Then you go to the defense section, and you see in subsection 3 of Section 319 that the defenses listed in Section 3, including the religious defense, which the amendment proposes to remove, only applies to willful promotion of hatred. Subsection 3 reads, no person shall be convicted of an offense under subsection 2. Please, read section 319, sub 3. It only applies to sub 2. And that is the willful promotion of hatred. It does not apply to the first section, which is the public incitement of hatred. I'm so tired.
I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I would assume so. I would assume, like, that's the thing, is, like, it's that good faith part. Where there's obviously limits already in there. I guess there's an argument about whether the limits are too onerous, or too low, or too high, or whatever, but it does not seem like it's a get out of jail free card by just saying, well, it's in my religious book.
Assumption after inciting hatred or inciting violence. And I would ask everyone to please stop saying that. I will have further submissions down the road. I implore you to please not do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Mr. Jennings, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to be at the Justice Committee, and I will. I don't want to give people the impression that I only come to committee to discuss procedural issues, but I will start with a couple brief procedural issues.
You know, I can't. I gotta do it.
I wanted to highlight in response to the discussion, and then I will cede the floor for reasons I'll explain. But I'll ask to be added back onto the list to make those substantive comments later on.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Like,
procedural issue I wanted to raise is just.
I knew you were using their example.
My colleague, Mr. Lawton, referenced.
Which I think Lawton brought up. I think
Minister.
Lawton tried to put a motion forward to have the hammer and sickle added alongside the swastika to the band thing, and then asked whether or not the keffiyeh could be considered a hate symbol.
1.3 sub 3 sub B. And I wonder if you could provide a ruling, Chair, on whether the minister's announcement of that amendment that I don't think was made public by the committee or had been moved yet constitutes a violation of the privileges of committee, or at least if you could rule on whether this is a question that touches on the issue of privilege.
I haven't seen the minister's statement, to be honest with you. So if you want to suspend for a second, I can look into it.
Chair, if you want to consider that question, and I can...
I'm happy to do that if you want to continue.
Continue for the time being. It was tweeted by the minister at 3:07, and I do believe this is a matter that touches on privilege. He specifically is claiming that a particular amendment with particular provisions is coming before the committee, and I don't think you can do that. The second matter of process I wanted to raise is regarding the role of parliamentary secretaries on committee. There was a time, actually, when...
Was this the post? Trying to figure out what it is that he's talking about.
About the unique role that parliamentary secretaries play on committees because they are representatives of the government. I want to quote her verbatim from the House of Commons in 2017, where she was arguing that
everyone knew this. So he's saying, so today, as part of its study of Bill C-9, the House of Commons Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights is set to discuss an amendment repealing Section 319 of the Criminal Code, often referred to as a religious exemption. Sean Fraser can say that because he read it in the news reporting that they did about him earlier in the day. It wasn't a secret at that point that they would be doing. I think even the Bloc was just openly saying that's what they were going to do. Oh God, did we? All right, never mind.
Parliamentary secretaries should be present on committees but should not be voting members and should be understood to be speaking particularly for the government. She said, this is June 15, 2017, this is exactly why I believe that part of the mandate we've been given by Canadians is to strengthen our institutions. A parliamentary secretary not only stands in for the minister but has access to information that would benefit members of the committee. Imagine that. That's why I'm suggesting that the parliamentary secretary be able to share that information. They could be equal members of the committee but not vote and not move motions. That way they could travel with the committee so that information is being shared with all committee members, which I believe would contribute to the level of discourse and decision-making that takes place here. The challenge with parliamentary secretaries voting on committees is that often we see them as just the voice of the minister of the government of the day. And oftentimes there is this perception that you need to vote exactly the way the PS does. That shouldn't be the case. So my colleague, Mr. Lawton, has asked Ms. LeftHandStu specific questions about...
Well, I mean, I don't even know if it's sneaky. It was just out in the open.
Insinuation by her colleagues, but this is precisely the position...
It was such public knowledge, I don't even know if Fraser would have even considered that he was disclosing anything.
...of them in parliamentary context. So we are all eager to hear...
Or
Ms.
doing
LeftHandStu
anything
do
wrong.
Exactly that. Answer the questions that have been put before her in terms of the government's position. I understand she said she would be speaking on it, so I'll end my remarks there. I might be added to the list to make a few substantive comments as well.
Yeah, no, that's literally what he's talking about. It would have been the Block's amendment to remove the religious exemption, and apparently the deal had been that if that amendment passed, the Block would help support getting this bill passed. And that had all been reported well before Fraser put that tweet out.
Well, but I'll await her response. And
his post is literally responding to the news reporting about
also
the amendment.
Matter of privilege, Chair.
Fortin, back to you.
Ça va, Monsieur le Président. Je retire.
I'm fine. Chairman, I will abstain.
Plutôt, je suis prêt.
Or I'm ready to vote, actually, if it's possible.
Thinking. Ms. LeftHandStu and then Ms. Krones.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Donc,
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to add my voice and perhaps a few words on this amendment. We know that the rise in hatred is extremely concerning, and we recognise that. It is important to send out a clear message. The defence of the religious exemption has never been used and will never be used to justify hateful propaganda. Freedom of religion is fully protected under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. This is a legal clarification. The defence of the religious exemption cannot be invoked to justify a discourse which would otherwise meet the very important definition of hateful speech. That was not the case when the defence existed, and we are clearly closing the door to any future interpretation in this direction. With
I'm guessing we may be spending a lot of time on this potential amendment.
Under the Charter, of course, we will continue to respect and protect freedom of expression and religious freedom, and both of these are guaranteed under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The withdrawal of the religious exemption will not in any way affect the capacity of people who have a faith to teach or practice or actually confess their faith. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa LeftHandStu. That takes us to Ms. Krones. You're down there. Okay, well, everybody keeps deferring. You're going to get right back to you. Back to Mr. Janis. There we go.
You want to go in first? Okay. Sorry, if I can be re-added to the list, I'd like to give Mr. Lawton the opportunity to speak ahead
Well,
of me.
Mr. Lawton's next on the list.
Okay, so I'll defer to the bottom again.
I'll start a new list then.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate Ms. LeftHandStu earlier in her unwillingness to answer my question, said she would be listening to the interventions of members of this committee and sharing thoughts of her own. She has had the opportunity to listen to interventions from this committee, and I did not hear in what she said a clear position on where the Liberals will be voting on this amendment. Now, I don't know whether she wrote her own remarks or whether Minister Fraser...
Won't you get the position when they vote on the amendment?
For a second that she is speaking as a rogue member that has not consulted with the minister that she represents and the prime minister she represents. Now, We did learn earlier in media coverage that the Prime Minister's office and the Minister of Justice were apparently not in line on this issue, and that may have led to some of the subsequent cancellations, postponements, extensions, abbreviations of meetings. But we are talking about a fundamental altering of not just the criminal code, but of longstanding religious freedoms in this country. The kind of decision that, if it is to exist at all, should have been a standalone bill. And it was. And when it was a standalone bill, the Liberals rejected it because they realized that this does not belong in a pluralistic country that represents people of all faith backgrounds and a House of Commons that represents people of all faith backgrounds. So my request of the government right now, my request of Ms. LeftHandStu...
Well, I mean, couldn't you make the exact same argument in the reverse, that in like a pluralistic democracy with a bunch of the whole coterie of different religions that people practice, that it makes more sense to not give anyone that defense? You could easily make the same thing, that since there's so many different people who believe so many different...
is to be interpreted or applied so as to interfere with the freedom of expression or the freedom of religion.
The internet just keeps dropping out there every once in a while.
Okay, we'll suspend for a moment now. Thank you.
Well, of course.
Applied in a way that it would actually infringe on...
They love. Hell yeah. All right, yeah. So at least it means it's not like shutting down. It's just buffering, basically. Are they back already? Oh, no, never mind.
Freedom of religion.
All right. Gonna go get more cookies.
Oh my God! Okay, it's happening.
Woo! Woo! We got Raiders.
Wait! Everybody, calm down.
Hello. Who do we get? Patriot Discourse. Welcome to the stream. Doing some late night clause by clause. Yeah, if you want to click in. So you're watching the actual stream. I'm LeftHandStu. If you don't know, I'm a political reporter in Ottawa. I cover federal politics, obviously. And we're currently watching what has been quite a contentious clause by clause study of Bill C-9, which is the Liberals' anti-hate legislation. Ooh, what was that noise?
I don't even know who you are.
Ooh, thank you for the follow, Patriot Discourse. Oh, hell yeah. Good job, Brogan. Well done doing the shout out. Everyone will give Patriot Discourse a follow. How is your stream? What are you guys getting up to? Is your government back open yet? That's one of the few things I think you can just objectively say that the parliamentary system has over the I mean, maybe you can argue it's not, but one of the ones I like better is that, like, if the government in power can't fund the government, you get a new government. Just get them out of there. They don't know what they're doing. If you don't know, if you're an American, you don't know what Bill C-9 is. Bill C-9 is like the anti-hate legislation. They're trying to make just sort of codify and make more concrete, obviously anti-hate laws and hate speech in the willful promotion of hate and the use of hate symbols like this, the Haken Cruise, the Nazi Haken Cruise. One of the things they had to take out was calling it a swastika, because that upset I think Hindus. I think there's a couple other. I think it might be in, like, the swastika might be a religious symbol in Jainism. I know it's quite, there's more than just the Hindus. That it's I think it's like in Southeast Asia it was sort of it, but it's like a lot of them sort of have like the four cardinal direction basically of that. Like if you take the Haken Cruise, you round it and you make it and connect all of the lines so it's a circle, and you give it the four colors, then you get the, like, they're all just sort of for like the four cardinal directions and all this different stuff. So it's like they're like, okay, so we won't say that the swastika is a hate symbol in the legislation. We will say that the Nazi Haken Cruise, which is technically a different thing. I think it's turned. That will be a hate symbol. They voted down an amendment to make the hammer and sickle, the communist hammer and sickle, specifically named a hate symbol. And currently, what they are arguing over is whether or not to vote on an amendment to remove the good faith religious exemption or religious defense against hate crimes or hate speech, whereas you could basically argue that if you were in good faith citing your religious document or religious faith, you can't be like accused or charged or found guilty of hate speech. What is hate speech, you say? Well, technically the legislation does have a definition for us. Bill C-9. Where's the, that's not it. I need the actual text of the bill. There it is. So an act to amend the criminal code, hate propaganda, hate crime, and access to religious or cultural. So technically, it doesn't create a. It's not technically a bubble zone bylaw. I mean, I'm not getting in trouble by defining what hate speech is or isn't, so I'm just going to let the bill do it. Where was it? Where was... Oh, yes. So anyone who commits an offense, referred to in this section as including an offense, if the commission of the included offense is motivated by hatred based on race, national or ethnic origin, language, color, religion, sex, age, mental or physical disability, sexual orientation, or gender identity or expression. In this section, hatred is the same meaning as 3197. Oh, wait, where is... Bill C-9 hate definition. I think I wrote about this, so I might have an easy way to find it. Yeah, because the Conservatives had accused the Liberals also of attempting to dilute the definition of hate speech because they didn't include the specific definition of it in the legislation, of the definition of what hate is. Where is it? Where is it? Okay, so yeah, so the definition of hatred, which is from the Supreme Court's 1990 R.V. Keegstra decision, which describes hate as an emotion of intense and extreme nature that is clearly associated with vilification and detestation. So, if you are promoting that emotion, that emotion of intense and extreme nature clearly associated with a vilification and detestation directed at someone based on their race, national or ethnic origin, language, color, religion, sex, age, mental or physical ability, sexual orientation or general identity or expression, you would be guilty of, and you committed an offense based on that. I mean, once you try to sort of like legislate what is and isn't hatred, and like when it crosses the line from dislike, it's not exactly a clear, bright line. It would be a pretty complicated kettle of fish, which is probably why this is already so incredibly contentious. Oh my god, are they still not back? Or did they return and I missed it? Nope, still not back. What am I looking for? I already got the Hillman one. Oh yeah, and today they tabled their new Protecting Children Bill, C-16.
Code.
We'll throw this
It's
on
called
while we
the
wait for a
Protecting
committee to get back.
Victims Act, and it would make murders driven by hate automatically first degree, whether they were planned or not. If the
link to my story, or which, to the definition of the
victim is a woman, the law would define that crime as femicide. The bill also creates a new criminal offense for coercive control against a partner. It cracks down on digital
want
violence,
the Texas
including AI
C-9?
deepfakes. And finally, it toughens penalties for sexual crimes, including child exploitation, both online and at home. Joining us now is the Minister of Justice, Sean Fraser. Minister Fraser, thanks for coming in the middle of a breaking news storm. Do you have any thoughts on the departure of Kirsten Hillman? It seems voluntary and collegial. What are your thoughts there?
Look, I just sent the ambassador a note to say thank you and congratulations.
No problem.
She has served in an exemplary fashion. I had the opportunity to work with her on a few
So wait,
occasions,
oh god,
when
did
we
I
were
miss it
negotiating
passing?
the, revisions of the Safe Third Country Agreement.
Andrew Lawton is tweeting that it passed?
Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa Tanzio. That takes us to Ms. Cronus. You're down there.
I must have gotten spaced out reading something.
Okay, well, everybody keeps deferring. You're going to get right back to you. Back to Mr. Janice. There we go.
You want to go in first? Okay. Sorry, if I can be re-added to the list, I'd like to give Mr. Lawton the opportunity to speak ahead of me.
Well, Mr. Lawton's next on the list.
Okay, so I'll defer to the bottom again.
I'll start a new list then.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate Ms. Latanzio earlier in her unwillingness to answer my question, said she would be listening to the interventions of members of this committee and sharing thoughts of her own. She has had the opportunity to listen to interventions from this committee, and I did not hear in what she said a clear position on where the Liberals will be voting on this amendment. Now, I don't know whether she wrote her own remarks or whether Minister Fraser did the courtesy of it, but I do not believe for a second that she is speaking as a rogue member that has not consulted with the minister that she represents and the prime minister she represents. Now, we did learn earlier in media coverage that the prime minister's office and the minister of justice were apparently not in line on this issue, and that
So
may
how
have led
does-
to some of the altering bill backgrounds and a House of Commons that represents the reason it was not in our original amendment package is because we had not seen
That Bill C-9
or be amended of express.
When did it pass? Did he tweet that out early? I saw Lawton tweeted that it had, but I swear to God, I don't think I missed that vote. They were still debating it.
To honor the lacity of the state.
Claiming that a particular
Ms. LeftHandStu and then Ms. Gross.
Merci.
She has had the opportunity to listen to interventions from this committee, and I'd hand that I.
Yeah, breaking. Liberal bloc amendment to Bill C-9 stripping the religious speech defense from the criminal code has been adopted. If Bill C-9 passes, people will be subject to criminal prosecution. Yeah, how did I miss the actual vote? Or am I, like...
Justice, suffering, good and evil. The most
It's it right here. It's it right here.
I mean, is it there?
Il n'y a pas une règle.
I want it to.
Mais je comprends, mais moi, je suis...
Mr. of you sitting near.
We're entitled to see here.
That's the discussion.
Because they were just, that's why, I thought that's what this whole thing was.
For the killing of an identifiable, do they need to be so aggressive?
Is they were all squeezing in so they could all have their say about this.
The problem that the Liberals are suggesting.
Thank you, Mr. Baber. Mr. Jennings, the floor is yours.
Discussion.
Opportunity to listen to interventions.
Ça va, Monsieur le Président. Je retire.
I'm fine. Chairman, I will abstain.
Plutôt, je suis prêt.
Or I'm ready to vote, actually, if it's possible.
Thinking. Ms. LeftHandStu and then Ms. Gross.
But my voice that is and would clearly close. Of course,
So last thing he said was, I'm ready to vote.
Okay, well, everybody keeps deferring. You're going to get right back to you.
The opportunity to speak ahead.
Earlier in interventions from this committee, whether Minister Fraser represents some of the subsequent cancellations, postponements, extensions, Minister's office. Now, I don't know to listen to her in her.
Well, defer to them. There we go.
confess their faith.
Okay, well, everybody keeps deferring. You're going to get right back to you.
I'm so confused.
Back to Mr. Jennings. There we go.
Okay. Sorry, if I can be re-added to the list, I'd like to give Mr. Lawton the opportunity to speak ahead
Well,
of me.
Mr. Lawton's next on the list.
Okay, so I'll defer to the bottom again.
Answer my question. Said she would be a clear position. Do not believe for a second. We did learn, but a loan bill that represents people to state that they will be.
That exhausts the
Am I losing my fucking mind?
So vote on BQ 3.
Okay. All right. So I did skip over it. There it is.
We. Mr. Chang.
Surprise.
Madame Dillon.
No idea that was
Then why are you, like, you knew she was going to vote for it.
Mr. Baber,
What? I don't even know what the point of
Mr.
all
Brock?
the kayfabe
Absolutely
is.
not.
Mr. Gill,
Big no.
Mr. Lawton,
Absolutely not.
Monsieur Fortin.
Wait, how'd you give 45 million to the Taliban? How did that happen?
Okay, BQ3 carries.
Point of order.
Yes, Mr. Lawton?
I have an amendment pertaining to the matter at hand that I would fit into the line now that's being circulated with the clerk. I just wanted to, that may not be a point of order, but it should go in now logically with where we are.
So the matter at hand being the clause by clause?
Sorry, the matter at hand being where we are.
So I guess, okay, so there was a vote that I just missed. It just happened really quickly. Sorry. Trump to holiday shoppers concerned about high prices. Look, don't be dramatic. Sometimes he can be just in his level of indifference to everything and just complete lack of empathy. Sometimes it loops back around to being funny. Only sometimes. Discussing which? Oh, the 45 million to the Taliban?
Sending $40 million a week to the Taliban?
Yes, sir.
Can you name other instances of foreign aid going to terrorist organizations?
We have assisted al-Shabaab in Somalia. There's been instances of the Khamsi network in Sudan, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, Kataib al-Hezbollah, Hayat Tahrir al-Shams in Syria. Dozens of terror organizations have received indirect assistance from U.S. foreign aid.
Yeah, well, I guess, was it because they're the government of Afghanistan? I guess that's, okay, so it's money for USAID that made its way into the hands of USAID money that was going to Afghanistan that surprisingly made it into the hands of the government of that country. Whether we like them or not, they just are. I'll throw this back on.
General Bondi, when it comes to dealing
Get
with the
more
fentanyl
cookies.
crisis. She is a consummate professional, extremely smart, well briefed, able to share information, leverage relationships. We're going to miss her terribly, and it's going to be a very tough hole to fill.
Okay, you have been busy on the legislative agenda. This, I think, today is your third piece of legislation.
That's right.
This sitting of Parliament. Before we get to the changes today, I need to ask you about C-9. This is the hate crime legislation, for lack of a better term. And I know there's been some issues with that in terms of getting it through because of the lack of a clear partner in Parliament. You've cut a deal with the Bloc Québécois to accept an amendment to remove the religious exemption for hate speech. There's some suggestion that this got tied up because the Prime Minister's office wasn't fully on board, but now it appears to be there. What is the status of this? Is the Prime Minister okay with this? Will the Liberals support this and embrace this amendment? Will this exemption go away in the law?
So a lot to unpack there.
Yes, I know. I'm sorry.
To start out, let's focus on what this law is actually about. It's about combating hate in Canada and making sure we're addressing the rise in hate crimes that have been committed against Canadians from different minority communities, including from different communities of faith.
Right.
From inception, the motivation was around the intimidation and obstruction of people outside religious institutions, preventing them from taking part in their community. The process that's unfolded over the last number of weeks, frankly, is typical for a minority parliament. we have been responsible to put forward the starting point by introducing legislation. I've had many conversations with my Conservative critics, with my Bloc critics, with my NDP critic, with Elizabeth May, with my own caucus colleagues, to understand how we can strengthen this bill. I've even entertained in public at my committee appearance, giving testimony on this bill, the very possibility of this specific amendment around the religious exemption. If committee members actually decide to embrace that change, you've got to remember that once a bill goes to committee, it's the committee that's in charge, particularly in a minority context, not the minister or the prime minister. I've had significant engagement with my Bloc critic, with other members of the committee, also with the prime minister's office to keep people informed as to where we were along the way. My job was to find a path forward to allow us to make good on the campaign commitment to address hate crimes in this country. As a result of the discussions we've had, it appears that that seems likely. The committees, I understand, meeting right now to discuss this and other potential amendments, and I'll look forward to seeing how they treat the various proposals that are coming through that process.
So essentially it's give the Bloc this amendment, or you might have to pull the bill, because the Conservatives are not against this, and this seems to be where the compromise exists right now for you to get the parliamentary majority you need.
Certainly, but let's just actually talk about the substance of what's being proposed, because there's a lot of misinformation that is being shared around there, suggesting this is the criminalization of faith, which I don't think any parliamentarian would stand for.
But there would be concerns. Like, there are certain faiths, like I was raised Catholic, right? You know, people, adherence to that, strict adherence, think homosexuality is a sin, gay marriage shouldn't be allowed, you know, same-sex adoption shouldn't be allowed, and might have concerns that if preaching that or advocating that they could be targeted for a crime. The religious exemption would protect them from that, but you argue the threshold's much higher than something that way.
Certainly, the threshold is much higher to willfully promote hate against an identifiable group of people. There's a difference between saying you have a point of view or reading scripture about same-sex marriage and actually promoting hate, vilifying, or inciting violence against.
I knew the mic was off, but I didn't want to take it in the bathroom.
The protections that this individual provision could have potentially afforded a person would likely be protected by the Charter or the existing public interest exemption. From my point of view, we should recognize that religions
conversations that members of this committee in good faith can deal with, and I suspect would be able to. I agree wholeheartedly with Mr. Brock that there is a lot more consensus around Bill C-14.
Hey, Mayor McCheese, how's it going?
Especially now.
Mr. Chang, yeah.
How is this relevant to C-9 again?
Chair, you'll find it. If you give me 60 seconds, it will become very clear.
It shouldn't take another minute.
You have your 60 seconds, but I would like you to get to the point.
Of course. So the reason I bring
maybe
that
get
up,
to the relevance in the first
is
minute.
Give the Liberals an opportunity to do the right thing. We, as Conservatives, are not going to allow this assault on religious freedom and freedom of expression to become
Mayor
law.
McCheese a follow.
And I am prepared to speak for as long as it takes to stop this from taking place, to make good on a promise that I made to my constituents, to my to Canadians, and
Point of order.
frankly,
I represent Burnaby, which is a very diverse community in Canada, and
You haven't heard his. Hold on. You haven't heard what he's going to say.
Yeah.
Long lead up to your point are acceptable. Mr. Chang, go ahead.
I believe that C-9 and C-14 are equally important.
Not a point of order.
He's 5 words into his point of order. Allow the member to make his point, and then I'll decide whether it's a point of order or not.
Chair, is there somewhere specific I should sit?
Holy crap!
You really want me to answer that question? I'm happy. Can I?
Are these all conservatives on this end too? So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And how many are even on the Justice Committee originally? I think they only have 4, including.
Be candid. Make yourself comfortable.
Or are these liberals? I can't tell.
Mr. Chang. You're done? Okay. All right. Thank you.
I think they're liberals on this side.
So, getting ready for being in government. As I was saying, we are prepared to do what it takes to stop not just bad law, but dangerous law from being enshrined in Canada's criminal code.
Okay, so I guess on the conservative side right now, it's just Garnet Genuous, who is additional, that isn't current like a full sitting member.
Their assault on civil liberties. and it is not something we will stand for. Thank you.
Okay, who is next? I think Mr. Jenness, you were next on the list.
Well, thank you, Chair. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak here at the Justice Committee. And I've been observing with great interest the discussion thus far on Bill C-9, and in particular, the discussion on the issues of religious liberty that have been raised by this Liberal bloc amendment that have passed and now are further discussed in this amendment from my colleague, Mr. Lawton, aimed at protecting religious freedom. And Chair, as I talk about religious freedom, I do want to just acknowledge the presence of people in the room who have come to Parliament Hill to observe these discussions, people who are concerned about religious freedom issues. I know I saw people here that I know from the Muslim, the Jewish, and the Christian communities, all who came to observe these discussions. And
well, no, because I think that's on the left side there is. I don't know if you can see him. Like the third from the bottom on the right there. Right there, like after, see this guy, that's MP Chang. The guy right to his right here. I think that's Jonathan Rowe, that's another conservative. Don't recognize these two, I can't, they're not, I don't know them well enough.
Long lead up to your point. Into his point of order. Allow the member to make
evening and who will be here as long as it takes.
But I think they may be conservatives too. I think one of them might be Fraser Tomey.
So I know there are people watching who are fighting on this issue, who are writing letters, who are emailing their members of parliament, who are
wild amount of conservatives
leaders, who are even door knocking in their own communities to raise awareness.
This committee right now.
With Bill C-9. I want to thank Canadians from all faith backgrounds and from coast to coast who have worked hard to make their voices heard. And I want you to know that conservatives are here in force. We hear you and we will stand with you, making the case for religious freedom and for freedom of speech. And we need people at home, people across the country, people who care about religious freedom, to continue making their voices heard, to continue contacting members of this committee and members of parliament, to continue talking to their neighbors and friends. It has been incredible to see the speed and the scope of mobilization that there has been in this country in response to this bloc Liberal deal attacking religious freedom. Communities have reacted with lightning speed. They have just been moved so much faster than I have ever seen before, and I know that mobilization is only beginning. And it was in response to this mobilization that the government initially appeared checked in their plans to attack religious freedom. As recently as this week, there was an article quoting multiple government sources that looked like it was people within the Liberal Party trying to throw the Justice Minister under the bus and say this whole thing was his idea cooked up without consulting others. But whatever the genesis of this bad idea within the Liberal Party was, I guess today they have decided to close ranks in their attack on religious liberty. We have just seen members of the government line up all to support the bloc amendment attacking religious freedom. And if members think they've started to receive a public response, if they think they've started to see Canadians concerned, I would say you ain't seen nothing yet. You're going to be hearing in the days, weeks, and months ahead from Canadians who take their religious freedom and their freedom of speech seriously, and who will be responding in force. In particular, I know that the Prime Minister has tried to suggest that he would be more open or more friendly to communities of faith than the last Liberal Prime Minister was. But with this amendment being adopted, that false impression has been totally blown out of the water. Prime Minister Mark Carney has shown with the vote of MPs today that he is willing to go even further than his predecessor in attacking the basic religious liberties of faith communities. And I know that faith leaders in every community will take note tonight of the fact that the Prime Minister has allowed this to happen, has supported his Justice Minister, and that the government, notwithstanding whatever second thoughts they may have had, has followed through on this attack on religious freedom. The Conservatives are the only party that is defending religious freedom, and we will maintain that stand. We will stand for what is right. We will stand alone if necessary. We will stand against Bill C-9, and we will defend the fundamental freedoms of Canadians. Religious freedom is deeply important. It is part of our Constitution.
Sorry, I should be reading shit while I watch something, because I'm doing like facial expressions completely unrelated to what Genuous is saying, I'm realizing.
Part of the implied Bill of Rights dating back to our founding as a country. It is fundamental to our political tradition. It is also in our commitment our commitment to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, reading from Article 18. Everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom, either alone or in community with others, and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. I want to observe Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights underscores the nature of religious liberty. It is not just a right for communities to preserve their traditions. It is not just a right that applies to people who are themselves religious. Religious freedom is for all people, whether they consider themselves religious or not. It is the freedom of thought, the freedom of conscience, the freedom of the individual to consider their humanity, to consider their place in the universe, to consider questions of ultimate meaning and truth, to, in the process of that consideration, come to their own conclusions that reflect their conscience, to deliberate about those conclusions, to change their conclusions, to forcefully debate those conclusions with others, and to live in accordance with those deeply held convictions. In that sense, religious freedom, as outlined in Article 18, can be thought of as the first freedom, the most foundational freedom, because the freedom of thought, the freedom of conscience that is linked to freedom of religion in Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is the foundation, the ability to form one's actions based on conscience and conviction is the foundation of all other freedoms. It is the basis of our humanity that leads us to further actions. And it is these provisions in Article 18 that have been attacked by this Bloc Liberal amendment. Now, while I'm speaking, if one of my colleagues could get me a glass of water or two, I would be extremely grateful. Mr. Chair, speaking of Article 18, I have worked a great deal in Parliament over the last 10 years on issues involving religious freedom. Issues of religious freedom have always been deeply important to me as a person of faith, as the grandson of a Holocaust survivor, and as someone who has, in their time in Parliament, come to know closely many different ethnic and religious communities in this country who have faced attacks on religious freedom. When I was first elected, our leader at the time, Rona Ambrose, gave me the great honor of taking on a role in our caucus that was called Deputy Shadow Minister for Human Rights and Religious Freedom. Nobody who I told initially had any idea what that was, but it was a role within our caucus that involved advocating for human rights and, in particular, religious freedom. Excuse me one sec.
I haven't heard Liberals or Bloc argue in favor of this amendment yet.
2015, when you
only heard they speak up for with POOs again. I think they've already dispensed with the Bloc amendment. They voted for it. It passed. I did miss the vote, but no, it's passed. Oh, I think it's just because he's still talking. Isn't this his point of order?
You took on a role called human rights and religious freedom. It was sort of a given that you were talking about issues in other countries, because back in 2015 it was assumed that that religious freedom was something that we had in Canada and that we had protected in Canada. Of course, I've mentioned that Canada is a party to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and our various constitutional documents underlying the importance of religious freedom. This is well established in our law, and I think the argument, by the way, just parenthetically, the argument you hear from the government in response to concerns about this amendment, about the previous amendment that we were discussing, the Liberal Bloc amendment, is don't worry because religious freedom is protected in the Charter. Now, the argument they're making essentially is don't worry about a statute that would appear on the face of it to violate religious freedom because religious freedom is protected in the Charter. As if the existence of the Charter establishes some law of physics which prevents legislation from passing that violates it. No, that's not how the Charter works. The way the Charter and constitutional protections on religious freedom and other rights work is laws can still get passed that violate those rights, and those laws are in force until they are struck down, until a judicial process intervenes. And in fact, they can create a chilling effect that limits the free practice of religion, that limits freedom of speech, that establishes other limits on practice and behavior, and those laws can persist in place unless and until there is a case that challenges them, and that case establishes that previous law was unconstitutional. Then and only then is that previous statute overturned. But I think we have seen, I think we saw during the pandemic period in particular, for example, that you can have the passage of laws that are unconstitutional, and those laws can remain in force for a while. And sometimes the subsequent determinations that those laws were unconstitutional come so far after the fact as to not be as immediately relevant to those who were victims of the human rights violations in the first place. So the argument of the Justice Minister, repeated by the Parliamentary Secretary and other Liberals, that don't worry, we have the Charter, well, that is not an argument for passing unconstitutional laws or laws that violate religious freedom. Those laws are still in effect, and they remain in effect until they work their way through the process. And furthermore, the existence of a judicial process for addressing violations of human rights does not obviate members of the obligation to consider issues of human rights during parliamentary debate, to consider the implications of the decisions they make for the protection of fundamental human rights. Our legislature has a responsibility to deliberate about matters of human rights and to come to consider judgments about them. We did not cease to have a legislature when the Charter of Rights was adopted, and we did not cease to have responsibilities as legislators for considering questions of fundamental human rights. And yet that does appear to be the implication of much of the rhetoric from the government. Again, don't worry, we have constitutional protection of human rights. So if you think the government passes legislation that violates human rights, don't worry, someone could fund an expensive charter challenge, and maybe a few years or decades down the line, we'd come to the conclusion that this bill shouldn't have passed. But in the meantime, of course, the damage has been done. That is an obvious problem, and I would encourage members of Parliament to do their jobs. That is, to consider the implications for fundamental human rights, and to vote on amendments and legislation in the context of that reality. So I want to just go back. I was speaking about kind of the origins of my engagement on the topic of religious freedom. When I was first elected as a member of Parliament, taking on this role within our caucus focused on human rights and religious freedom. And this was to advocate at the time, the understanding was human rights and religious freedom. That's something that we're concerned about in other countries, because generally speaking, in Canada, we have good protection for religious freedom. That was where we were in 2015. That was the general expectation. And I was pleased to take on this role at a time when the role was very personal for me for another reason, and this is that Canada had established under the Stephen Harper government an office for protecting religious freedom, and the Office of Religious Freedom was embedded within the Department of Foreign Affairs, again, based on the understanding at the time that challenges to religious freedom would primarily be in the international domain. More recently, when I talk about the Office of Religious Freedom, a lot of people tell me, well, we could really use one of those focused on Canada, focused on domestic threats to religious freedom. But at the time, this was an office embedded in foreign affairs. And from what I understand, the genesis of this idea for Prime Minister Harper, Shahbaz Bhatti, who had been a minister in the Pakistani government, a minister for minority affairs.
Can I interrupt you for a sec? The interpreter's telling me you're talking too fast, and you can probably see that because you're looking at yourself on the screen. So I would ask that you slow down a bit for the benefit of the interpreters.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry. I was under the impression that the committee wanted me to move as quickly as possible through the remarks.
Yeah, but
I am willing.
Still need to do interpretation.
On that note, since we've paused for a moment, I have good news. We've secured resources for tomorrow and Thursday from 3:30 until midnight.
Oh, goody!
Thank you, Chair. When I graduated,
goody.
The motto was "In omnia paratus," which means "prepared for all things," and I've taken that motto to heart in my service in Parliament. So, pardon me, Mr. Chair.
But it had nothing to do with sex. I wasn't
Are you
thinking
saying it
about
wasn't that long ago? Yeah. Okay.
Point of order.
I say that out of envy more than anything.
Yeah.
Point of order.
Yes. Go ahead.
Just on programming, so you said that resources have been secured for tomorrow and Thursday, so I suspect meeting notices will be forthcoming. I just want to know, are we going to be continuing with clause by clause of the Liberal censorship bill, or will they agree to let us study bail on Bill C-14 in one of those meetings?
You'll have to wait till the notice comes out, but we're continuing with clause by clause on C-9.
Okay.
A point of order. I also wanted to clarify whether there are resources available Friday and next week as well.
So there's every time they cut back, there's more people at this table. I swear to God. Okay, so that is Brandon Rowe. So there's at least 6 conservatives at this table right now. And is that? I think that's MP Bext. It's my friend's dad. Me and my buddy Keen.
Well, they're criminalizing Christmas anyway, so.
Yeah, I swear to God, that's.
Well, thank you, Chair. Just on the issue of working on the weekend,
I think that was
there's a relevant scriptural text I can reference about that, and I do so with some trepidation, wondering if this could lead to prosecution. But there's
good Lord, my God, my dude. You have parliamentary privilege.
Where it's discussed whether it is permissible,
even if that were a real worry.
In the well on the Sabbath to pull it out. Implication being that yes, even if on an obliged day of rest, your cow falls in the well, it is still permissible to pull it out. So, from my perspective,
thanks for explaining one of the most straightforward of those.
And I will be prepared to work through the weekend and through whatever other holidays and holidays intervene in order to pull the cow out of the well as best I can. I hope the Minister of Heritage won't seek my prosecution as a result of that reference. Now, anyways, back to the point I was making, and out of
I grow tired.
Respect for our interpreters, I will endeavor to speak a little bit more slowly. So I just some of the context on issues of religious freedom. The point being that taking on this role in 2015 at a time when Canada had an office of religious freedom, that office was embedded within the office of the Minister of Foreign Affairs and did important work. The office was inspired by the work of one Shahbaz Bhatti, who had been the Minister for Minority Affairs in the Pakistani government. And he was an advocate for the rights of minorities in Pakistan and an advocate against a blasphemy law that was used aggressively to prosecute religious minorities for Canada. And he met with members of parliament. And
Same point of order.
Issues of religious freedom
Still.
in Pakistan, and he asked Canada to do more to respond to this issue of violations of religious.
I love my
freedom.
job sometimes.
And he also talked about, while he was here in our parliament, about the fact that he believed his life was at risk as a result of his advocacy. And I know he met many of our colleagues. I don't think there are that many folks that are still around, but I know he met many of those who were members of parliament at that time who were very touched and inspired by what he said. And people asked him, well, why don't you stay here in Canada if your life is at risk? And he said, no.
I mean, I guess that you make a good point. But if you remove the religious exemption, then it would put those, whatever new religions would emerge, on the same, like, neutral ground. Whereas if you kept the religious exemption, then any new religion probably would have more difficult time benefiting from that exemption. Or at least their adherents would, I suppose.
He was an incredibly heroic figure, somebody who knew the risks, who talked about how he knew the risks, and nonetheless continued his fight for religious freedom. As I recall, he met Prime Minister Harper while he was here in Canada, and following this assassination, the Harper government launched the Office of Religious Freedom, an office designed to facilitate advocacy by Canada on international issues around religious freedom. And the office had a number of functions, one of which was to speak publicly about religious freedom issues internationally. Another was to inform the Department of Foreign Affairs to ensure that public servants were aware of the situation around religious liberty and how it may be intersected with other work that they were doing. And the third function was to run concrete programming. And I think today about some of the issues that are now getting a bit more attention, such as the
wish I had checked the clock on when he started this one.
In Nigeria, and in many cases,
Well,
where
good
we
thing
hear
they
about
blocked off
persecution of religious
tomorrow and Thursday.
Canada's Office of Religious Freedom was actually running specific programs on the ground.
I mean, that is a very interesting theological question, because it's like that would, there's no non-good faith. Like, you couldn't say, well, he's interpreting the proclamation from the Pope to hate Pastafarians in a bad faith way, and therefore being too hateful towards Pastafarians. So that is a pretty difficult conundrum. I mean, though, there is like the lines about like how you have to like stone adulterers in I think both I think all three of the Abrahamic texts probably have similar language on that part. Obviously, since it's probably in the Old Testament Torah portion. But I assume whatever the Quran says about adulterers is much more lenient.
For freedom and justice on the world stage around these religious freedom issues. So, after the election in 2015, when I was first elected, and also the Liberals took office, the government decided that they were going to eliminate the Office of Religious Freedom. And this probably should have been, in a way, a sign of things to come, that the government immediately chose not to renew the mandate of the Office of Religious Freedom.
Mr. Housefather.
Relevance, Mr. Chair. He's straying farther and farther away from an amendment to the bill and Clause 4. Like,
Sorry,
we're not now debating whether or not the Office of Religious Freedom should be further and farther away.
So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4. Forget what her name is, but that's a conservative MP. I'm gapping on her name right now. It's all the only one I can think of is Kuzi, and that's not Kuzi. I think all three of these conservative MPs. So that's like 7. Why are there so many MP? Why are there so many conservatives? Especially when it's like, it's just like they're not even talking. It's just Garnet.
From an amendment to the bill and clause 4. Like,
Sorry,
we're not now debating whether or not the Office of Religious Freedom should be renewed or not renewed. This is getting very far away from where we're going, Mr. Chair. And I don't mind, I understand that the amendment has the words freedom of religion in it, but I think you need to just rein it back so it deals with the Criminal Code of Canada and the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I agree with Mr. Housefather.
Yeah, well, that's
sort of
not
lost
correct,
the
yeah.
thread there a while ago myself. Maybe it was after high school, I think, when you mentioned. But if you could bring it back towards what we're talking about.
Chair, if you've lost the thread, I'm happy to go.
Oh, Jesus, shut up.
Speaking now.
Let me rephrase that. I don't think there was a thread. But if you could bring it back closer to what
Chair,
we're talking about, we'd all be grateful. Thank you.
I have been led to believe that these issues of religious freedom are important in your constituency as well, especially the assaults on religious freedom that we've seen.
Possibly Fraser Tomey?
Community.
Yes, your aunt is one of my political allies. I work very closely on her.
No family's
issues,
perfect,
so
Chair. But the
she tells me that all the time.
Yeah, there it is. There's some fun back and forth.
But sure, I mean,
yeah, caught him. Oh, that's Chuck Al.
Let's just reiterate the amendment.
It's the other one.
Before
Dude, there's like 7 conservative MPs at this committee
the amendment
for some
says
reason.
Nothing in this section is to be interpreted or applied as to interfere with the freedom of expression or the freedom of religion. And so I think it is fairly obvious that arguments pertaining to the nature of religious freedom are not only tangentially relevant, but centrally relevant. They are not only part of the issue, they are the issue. And I think the point initially is to note how there has been a sort of progressive pattern on the part of government in terms of the incremental attacks on religious freedom. When the Office of Religious Freedom was removed, we should have maybe seen the writing on the wall. And I hope I can say the writing on the wall without being prosecuted, because that is also a scriptural allusion. It refers to a passage in Daniel, for those who are less familiar.
Come on, man.
But we've seen over the course of the life of this government the gradual furthering of an agenda that attacks religious freedom, that attacks the positions of faith communities. And I think some people had thought, because of the professions of the new prime minister, that he would be different in this regard. But actually what we're seeing today is that the approach of the...
I'm going to start gaming soon.
Of the current prime minister is actually in significant respects worse than the approach of his predecessor. So we saw this government attacking or removing the Office of Religious Freedom, and I think doing so, claiming that, well, don't worry, we can advance religious freedom or advance human rights in other ways, we can use other vehicles, and notably, they had promised at the time to maintain an advisory board that was associated with the Office of Religious Freedom. And I think this advisory board was actually a very positive kind of aspect of the work of the committee as well. And the advisory board did important work bringing together faith leaders from various communities to consult the government provide advice on various issues. And I think it reflects the reality that it's good for the government to be talking to and engaged with leaders from a variety of different backgrounds, including faith leaders. So we have seen this progressive series of attacks by the government on religious freedom up to this point. And Chair, I will have much more to say about this, so I wonder if I can be added to the bottom of the list. But I have been advised that some of my colleagues have some context they'd like to add before I go further, so I'm happy to do that. But just before I see the floor, Chair, are you planning on ruling on the question of privilege that I raised earlier regarding the Minister Fraser leaking confidential material from the committee?
It had been reported
We have Ms. Cronus.
extensively earlier in the day.
The question of the privileges of the committee, I raised that issue
I understood
at
that
this point
then,
an
and I
hour and a half
understand that
ago.
now, so thank you.
You're
Ms.
continuing
Cronus,
to think about it, eh? Okay, well, I haven't ceded the floor yet, Chair.
Well, you just said you were
But now
ceding
I
the
will
floor,
cede the
but
floor.
we'll make up your mind.
No, but I said before I cede the floor, I wanted to hear from you on the matter of privilege. And,
Okay, so you'd heard from him, so then.
So are you done?
You said you have no answer.
Are you done?
You're still.
Oh my, good.
I'll let you know when I
Googly,
have an answer.
good googly moogly.
Timeline, Chair?
Are you finished, Mr. Jennis? We could sit.
Well,
we
not,
could sit here and have this very interesting
not yet.
banter all night if you
I'll
want.
tell you when I am. But are you?
Keep talking then.
Okay. Are you planning on ruling on the matter of privilege
I've
tonight?
already answered the question. You keep talking.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you plan to be as forthcoming as Ms. Latanzio was. So that at this point, I will cede the floor, but I'll ask you to add me to the list.
All right, Ms. Cronus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to contribute to the committee's deliberation of this bill and to the debate about this clause, which removes important safeguards for freedom of expression and religious freedom in particular. And I'm going to focus in on the idea that it behooves this committee and all the members of this committee to vote against this clause because of the fact that we should always vote against laws that we believe are unconstitutional. And I would submit to members of this committee that this clause, as it's proposed, amends the criminal code in a manner that is, in fact, unconstitutional in every way. It violates the Charter, it violates the Constitution, and in my remarks I will explain how it arguably even violates the principles of natural justice. So in addition to doing that, when combined...
House, sorry, we have a point of order, Mr. House.
Yes, I love Ms. Cronus, but the yeah, she's a wonderful person. I am a huge fan of Ms. Huge fan. But I think she's speaking.
Oh, I love late night committee.
Mr. Lawton's amendment removes all of these rights. She's not speaking to the amendment that's right now on the floor.
Well, I actually will be arguing that Mr. Lawton's amendment is important because it restores these rights.
I understand, but you were just at this amendment, so I just wanted to clarify that you weren't speaking to Mr. Lawton's amendment that you're arguing is doing that.
Oh, well, I thank you.
We're all feeling better now. Okay.
We're all widely,
It's a big old love fest.
We're all getting very emotional now. Please continue.
So thank you for your many kindnesses, and as my late father would have said, thank you for everything. So this amendment is necessary in order to make it so that this bill is consistent with the Charter and the Constitution and these principles of natural justice. Because without it, this bill, especially when it's combined with the proposals to remove the Attorney General's consent to private prosecutions, which this committee did reject, but which the House could always revive, as we've seen in some cases when bills come back from committee, parts of them are revived. The bill as written has the power to amplify and unleash a wave of anti-religious animus and quite frankly both inter and intra-religious conflict across this country as people use these provisions to litigate the idea that the state through the courts should effectively be able to edit the Bible, the Quran, and the Torah and other religious texts to ban the parts that offend them. So even if we have
don't-
been successful in restoring,
I don't know if
the
that's what's gonna
need for
happen.
the Attorney General's consent for private prosecutions, the reality is that everything gets weaponized on social media, and this means that public assertions that various people should be arrested because of the things that they say at the pulpit and in other religious spaces will proliferate. And this is especially distressing considering the fact that these calls are already not uncommon in some of our communities. So I'd like to explain how my colleague's amendment helps. So the separation of church and state is a very important subject that sits at the heart of Canada's constitutional identity. It is a fundamental governing principle of our society.
Oh, there's
but
just a
one
kid
that
running
developed
around
over
in the
time
background.
And
Almost
one that
9 p.m.
actually influenced the development and the
It is.
creation of
It's
the
past that
defense
kid's
of
bedtime.
sincerely held
He should be in
religious
bed.
belief within our hate
Someone take that
propaganda
little boy home.
And so to
and, like,
understand why that defense
where are his
exists
parents?
and why Parliament has preserved it across
Obviously, it should be his
decades
parents
and
who do that,
across
not just
governments,
anybody.
we need to focus on something deeper. We need to understand how Canada came to adopt a model of state neutrality in matters of faith and the caveats to that. A model that protects both freedom of religion and freedom from religious coercion. Because these are ideas that did not appear suddenly. They emerged slowly through centuries of negotiation, conflict, and constitutional development. They do also reflect the unique character of our political history here in Canada. So when we look back to the earliest chapters of the Canadian story, we do see that long before Europeans arrived on this continent, Indigenous peoples had rich spiritual traditions that were deeply embedded in their community life. These traditions, of course, varied from nation to nation, but they shared important themes. They recognized individual spiritual autonomy, they recognized collective responsibility, and they were not controlled by a central political authority. They were part of life rather than being dictated by the state. And it's important to remember this because it shows that the idea that belief is personal has very deep roots in this land. Haichka, for this we are grateful. The arrival of European colonial powers, of course, introduced different models. Under French rule in the 17th and 18th centuries, the Catholic Church, of course, played a central role in administering education,
I don't want to watch my
healthcare, and social services.
Discord checkpoint right now.
Church and state were really intertwined during that period as mutually reinforcing institutions.
This sounds like a history class.
Yeah, we're getting testy now. We're getting testy.
Learn something.
All right,
May I continue, Mr.
the
Chair?
comments from the peanut gallery aren't helping. I realize it's getting on into the evening, but I think we can show a little respect for each other at a higher level than that, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've actually worked.
I understand there's a continuing request to keep it focused on the amendments in the bill, and I think that's fair. So, but
well, and
you've got the floor.
I am doing that. I actually worked hard on these remarks, Mr. Chair. I spent a good amount of time researching this, and I think that if you look at the way that our courts consider the constitutionality of various provisions in our legislative history, that it is actually not unusual to see comments like these and to see remarks like these. I mean, look at the Cowichan Tribes decision, which was just issued. It was 800 pages and had hundreds of pages of history. And so if my honorable colleague doesn't want to hear about that, then I'm sorry for that, but it is actually part of our constitutional history to recognize, our constitutional litigation system to recognize that history. So I'm just trying to see where I was here. So these arrangements which shaped Quebec society did continue even after Britain took control of New France in 1763. We, of course, had the Quebec Act of 1774 protecting Catholic rights as a means of ensuring political stability. And this is where we really do continue to see this recognition of practical necessity and a unique flavor and character to our laws as they developed. And of course, as Canada developed, waves of settlers brought diverse faith traditions. There were Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, Muslim, and other communities, Hindu, that came and lived side by side, sometimes peacefully and sometimes, of course, in tension. And in the 19th century, these arrangements did come under increasing scrutiny as our populations diversified. I mean, we've had to find ways to live together, secular, religious, since the beginning of our constitutional grand bargain, to coin a phrase. So when Confederation was established in 1867, this
oh my God, we just got to
was
Confederation.
Very complicated. There's, of course,
They're-
protection in our Constitution Act, protecting denominational school rights that exist.
So I'm starting to see the makings of a strategy here. Just gotta drag this out as long as possible, so that they can't get it back to the House to get it sent to the Senate.
Existed at the time, and this is again another
They're just gonna use up-
political compromise.
It will be interesting to see how they waste another 2 days of committee meeting, or at least attempt to.
Spirit of compromise has been fundamental to our communities. Now, in the decades that followed, several events continued to shape Canada's approach to this issue. And of course, as my colleagues from Manitoba know, one of the most important was, in fact, the Manitoba schools question in the 1890s. Manitoba, of course, had ended public funding for Catholic schools, which sparked a national debate that involved, not unlike this one.
I wonder how many M-dashes there are in these speeches.
Eventually, Manitoba's decision, of course, stood in that case, and there was a shift towards secular public schooling that became more pronounced across the country. And that debate showed that Canadians were increasingly accepting the idea that public institutions might not be tied to the doctrine of a particular faith, but it, of course, did not do away with the idea that faiths and sincerely held religious beliefs needed to be protected, even in circumstances where we might vehemently disagree with them. Now, by the middle of the 20th century, our social landscape had changed significantly, and the hospitals, universities, and social services that had once been governed by religious institutions became integrated into those publicly funded systems. And that, of course, laid the groundwork for the modern understanding of church-state separation, which is a government, and this is where I come back to this bill, and this amendment. It's a government that neither imposes religious doctrine nor interferes, and this is the part that's very important, that it doesn't interfere in religious practice.
Oh, it's a baby too.
This is foundational, and this conversation that we have had over
It's
the
just a whole
decades
daycare in the back there.
is fundamental to our being a society that respects diverse beliefs while protecting individual rights. And of course, the adoption of the Charter in 1982 brought constitutional clarity to this concept. Section 2A protects freedom of conscience and religion. Section 2B protects freedom of expression. Section 15 requires equality before the law. And together, what these provisions did is they codified what had already been developing for over a century, which is the idea that the state must remain neutral in matters of faith. It must protect the right to believe, the right not to believe, and the right to express beliefs peacefully. Now, one of the most painful reminders of
grab another drink, and I'll
the
be back.
danger of church and
We'll play
state.
some Timberborn for
Well,
at
why
least
don't I
another
just go?
hour.
When Parliament
If they're going to go for
enacted
another 3
Section
days, then there's no point
319,
watching till 11:30.
which prohibits that willful promotion of hatred, it had to navigate the same delicate balance that had shaped our country's development and that I've been expounding and explaining through my remarks. On one hand, the state has a duty to protect vulnerable groups from hate propaganda. On the other hand, Canadians have to be free to express their religious beliefs, to teach their doctrines, read their scriptures, and engage in theoretical debate. Parliament at the time did not want clergy or people of faith to fear prosecution for simply expressing traditional beliefs, no matter how outdated or how wrong we might think they are. And that's where the defenses that we're discussing came from. The solution to this was the inclusion of several defenses, including the one that has become known as the defense of sincerely held religious beliefs. So this defense protects statements made in good faith on a religious subject or based on religious opinion. And the key words there are in good faith. The defense does not protect malice. It does not protect hostility or efforts to encourage hatred. It protects genuine attempts to express or explain religious doctrine. And that, Mr. Chair, is something that I feel has been lost in this debate. That there have been people, and there has been some encouragement from both the Bloc and from my Liberal friends across the aisle, and in this case, mostly across the table. There has been an effort to make it as if the removal of this defense is necessary to be able to protect vulnerable groups. But in fact, the words in good faith that are embedded in this defense actually do that job for us. And this the defense fits in that way squarely within Canada's unique and long history of the separation of church and state. Because what a neutral state does not police doctrine. A neutral state does not decide which theological views are permissible. A neutral state does not suppress good faith religious teaching, however distasteful it may be. To coin a phrase that one of my rabbinical friends has used, we all have our beliefs, but none of us have met God yet. And so it's hard to know who is actually right. Now, at the same time, a neutral state can and does have an obligation to address the deliberate and harmful promotion of hatred. And the criminal code as it exists today draws that line carefully. And I would submit to you that it behooves us as parliamentarians not to erase that line recklessly or through these provisions. Because when the charter arrived, the courts have already reviewed these provisions. In the Keekstra case of 1990, which I was actually involved in as a high school student, the Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of hate propaganda laws, but emphasized that the religious defense was an important safeguard. The court pointed to the requirement that prosecutors prove willfulness and the availability of good faith religious expression as evidence that Parliament had respected both freedom of religion and the need to combat hate speech. The balance was tested again, and it was tested again when Parliament decided to expand the list of protected groups. In 2004, when sexual orientation was added, Parliament examined whether the religious defense would continue to offer adequate protection. Members across the political spectrum at that time acknowledged that people of faith must remain free to express their beliefs without fear of criminal prosecution. The same debate resurfaced in 2017 when gender identity and gender expression were added. In each instance, Parliament concluded that the criminal code's existing safeguards were strong, principled, and consistent with Canada's constitutional tradition. The concerns that we're discussing today in this committee are echoed in recent reporting and in the principles of free speech and freedom of religion that we held dear when I was a human rights advocate many years ago and involved in all three of the historical references that I just talked about in terms of that litigation. As the Toronto Star noted this week, even some of the strongest advocates for equality and for social justice have historically defended both freedom of expression and freedom of speech as a universal safeguard. And 2 decades ago, I'm reminded of this because Gilles Marchaldon was quoted in the article, and he, of course, is a former executive director of EGAL, and he was a mentor of mine in my human rights work. And he reminded Canadians that freedom for all means freedom for each. And he said this while he was defending the expressive rights of an Alberta pastors whose views he described at the time as being misguided and vitriolic. And I remember having long conversations about this when this was going on. Because what mattered to Gilles was not the content of the speech, but the principle of it. The idea was that if the state could silence one unpopular voice, who might be next? And this was, by the way, this was before social media, before people took to social media to say that this person should be arrested or that person should be arrested because they quoted this thing or that thing. The fact that the person might not be arrested didn't mean that we haven't had a proliferation of defamation suits, human rights suits, and all kinds of litigation around these concepts. Gilles' point has lost none of its force today because protecting the rights of people we disagree with is in fact still how we protect the rights of everyone. So the article does go on to warn, as I have in these remarks, that Bill C-9 risks abandoning the careful constitutional balance that we have built over decades and that I have explained in some detail this evening. The bill would expand police authority to lay hate-related charges based on a far broader and more subjective definition of hate. And depending on how the amendments work to various definitions in here, it actually could get quite broad. And as we know, there are other countries right now that are really struggling with this. Legal experts and civil liberties groups rightly caution that this proposal appears less as a tool for protecting marginalized groups and more as a broad expansion of police and state power with a high risk of misuse. And critics from across the political spectrum fear that the legislation would chill legitimate dissent, restrict peaceful protest near religious institutions, and place expressive freedom in the hands of law enforcement officers who are already struggling and will continue to struggle to distinguish political slogans from criminal acts. And so, Mr. Chair, this approach undermines the very compromises that our courts and parliaments have worked to maintain. Instead of strengthening social cohesion,
I think that's a fair definition of the issue, Spioni.
By criminalizing speech rather than confronting hatred through democratic debate, education, and community resilience. And, you know, when we forget our history in this country, when we don't want to listen to it, when we want to go for the soundbite and the social media thing today, it makes it difficult.
That's ironic.
And I just want to. I'm working towards the end of my remarks, but I want to emphasize that the religious defense has never been a blank check in this country. Courts have been very clear here that good faith has always meant sincerity. It has always meant that the purpose of the expression has to be to explain, interpret, or discuss a religious subject, not to demean or target an identifiable group. Judges, and I've been an adjudicator myself, and I've been in a position where I've been able to mentor other adjudicators and to learn from them.
Is this a Liberal MP?
And I can tell you that judges do
Or
examine
Conservative
tone,
MP.
context, and intent. They look for,
This is
in
Conservative
these
MP,
kinds
I'm
of
pretty sure.
circumstances, they look for whether the speaker is genuinely engaged in religious expression or whether they're attempting to use religion as a shield for conduct that the criminal law seeks to prohibit. It reinforces the balance that Parliament seeks to maintain. We have a system that's working. And if we step back and consider that broad historical arc, we can see how consistent Canada's approach has been up until this point. From Indigenous traditions that recognize personal conscience, to colonial debates over denominational schools, to charter jurisprudence, to modern discussions of hate propaganda, the underlying principle of this debate has always been the same. It has been that the state has to remain neutral. It must not impose belief, but it also cannot suppress belief that is expressed in good faith. And at the same time, we have managed at least up until recently when enforcement has become a real problem, to protect our citizens from hate and discrimination. So that defense of sincerely held religious belief exists because Parliament, the very institution that we are a part of and that we're expressing ourselves through today through committee, because Parliament recognized that hate propaganda laws, which do serve an important purpose, must not inadvertently undermine the freedoms that define our democracy. So the separation of church and state is not traditionally listed, of course, as one of the principles of natural justice, which in the common law is focused on procedural fairness. But natural justice addresses how decisions must be made, not how the institutions of the state must be structured. Its core principles are the right to be heard and the right to an impartial, unbiased decision maker. These rules exist to ensure that government acts fairly, transparently, and without favor, and don't prescribe a particular constitutional arrangements between religious and institutions and civil authority. And it's very important that we keep it that way. So, as we continue to work in committee, it's worth remembering that Parliament has revisited this issue many times, and that the legacy of the separation of church and state in Canada is actually the foundation upon which the religious defense in Section 319
Get these beavers to work.
It is a legacy of balance, Mr. Chair, a legacy of restraint
Oh, come
and
on.
respect for pluralism, and it is a legacy that takes into account the rich history of this country that helps us understand
Why is
why
Timberborn
the defense
deciding
was
to be
created,
funky all
why
of a
it has
sudden?
been preserved, and why it remains an essential part of the criminal code. It also helps explain why I have received so much email, so many phone calls.
You're still streaming? Can't tell. Yes? Yes. Yes. All right, perfect.
Analyzing them is unacceptable. What my colleague has mentioned, that it seems like that there is a political deal. The report confirms that the Liberal government struck a deal with Bloc Québécois to secure support for Bill C-9 by removing this safeguard.
There we go.
In real world consequences, if you are going to see
What, the game?
Whether it's pastors,
It shouldn't.
imams, or
Timberborn's
priests,
not a like a
could face charges for teaching traditional
real
doctrine.
intensive game.
This amendment goes to
That's
a
the
very
annoying
heart
thing.
of what Parliament is supposed to do, protect Canadians while preserving their fundamental freedom. It should not be.
Although it will, like
It
my
should not be
everything
party.
takes a toll on my setup. Just
yet,
just
here we
normal
are
streaming
debating
a
on
single
this issue.
video takes a toll on my
And
setup, as
we
you can
all
see
know
from all the
that
drops.
We don't want hate, crime, or any other crime. We are against those ones.
This computer's almost 6 years old in like as of like
It is
probably
necessary to explicitly protect freedoms
April,
that are
May-ish, because I got it with
already
my
guaranteed under the Canadian Charter of Rights
COVID
and
bucks from Trudeau when he gave
Conservatives believe this language is essential, not optional. And I will tell you, by going through these things, this amendment is not about fighting hate. It's about criminalizing scripture. So we have to deal with it. Canada is a free democratic society. That freedom does not flow from government permission. It flows from the inherent rights of individuals. Rights the state is obligated to respect, not redefine or weaken through vague legislations. Freedom of expression or freedom of religion are not.
Sorry, Mr. Gill, I'm going to interrupt you. Your own colleagues don't seem too interested in listening to you because they're all talking, so I'm going to ask if people can just keep the comments down in the back, so Mr. Gill has the floor.
Okay. Freedom of expression and freedom of religion are not abstract legal concepts. They are lived realities for millions of Canadians, for people of faith, for cultural communities, for newcomers, for parents, for teachers, and for anyone who dares to express an opinion that may not align with the views of the government of the day. Clause 4, as currently drafted, expands criminal provisions around mischief and intimidation relating to places of worship, schools, and community institutions. Conservatives agree that vandalism, threats, harassment, and violence against these spaces are reprehensible, that must be punished. There is no disagreement there, but the concern, and it is serious, is that poorly defined language combined with an activist enforcement culture.
All right, one more attempt to play Timberborn.
And when it comes to criminal law,
because it was I was trying to play it yesterday off stream and it wasn't working.
They affect real lives. Religious leaders are already under pressure to navigate complex social issues. These amendments add the risk of criminal charges simply for quoting scriptures, sermons, and
feels like there's a lot of chatter in that room right now. They are not listening to this man.
History. Parents and families are going to be worried. Teaching their children scriptures at home could be accused of promoting hatred. Family traditions of reading sacred texts together could be chilled by fear of legal consequences. Concern is also there. The bill's publicly display provisions could extend to digital platforms posting scriptures on Facebook.
This is very clearly
or TikTok could be treated as a criminal act. Faith communities rely on live
about public displays of it. So social media is probably fair, but I don't think like reading scripture in your home could be included.
Freedom of conscience, religion, thoughts, belief, opinions, and expression. Removing the exemption undermines these rights and invites constitutional challenges. Canadians should not have fight in court to defend their right to read scripture. Mr. Chair, I would like to say this. It ensures that Clause 4 cannot be interpreted in a way that chills speeches, punishes beliefs, or interferes with religious practice that is peaceful and lawful. Canadians are already uneasy. They see professors disciplined for unpopular opinions. They see faith leaders dragged into legal battles. They see protesters treated differently depending on whether their message aligns with the government narrative. This amendment says plainly expressing beliefs, even strong ones, even uncomfortable ones, is not a crime. Preaching a faith-based view is not.
What do you mean the game is already running?
Peaceful protest is not intimidation. Public debate is not hatred. If the government truly believes that these are the things that are necessary, then I would say government need to think, we as a legislators
play in
need
safe
to think
mode.
About all these things.
See what if that helps.
The language in this bill as currently drafted risks blurring the links between criminal conduct and lawful expressions. Canadians are increasingly worried that expressing sincere held beliefs, whether religious, moral, or cultural, could be interpreted by the state as harmful or criminal.
Point of order. This member's extended remark risks mischaracterizing the amendment.
Say it again.
How is I focus something to say like expressing your...
Do you have a point of order? You have to make a point of order. You don't have to ask point of order.
Hold
Yeah,
on.
they're just getting a little, they're getting real too testy. Come on, guys. Like, wait, come
I
on.
will not tolerate people mocking somebody's ability to speak a language at this committee.
Oh, that is...
That was I think that was kind of exactly what you're doing.
Anyway, Mr. Chan, Mr. Chang.
It seems very similar to. Oh, jeez.
You can keep asking until you're blue in the face. I'll get back. You'll get an answer at the appropriate time.
This member's remark was not speaking to the amendment.
We still got 2.5 hours.
Is it a point of order?
No, carry on. Point of order is relevance.
Yeah, that's relevance.
Yeah.
Make the point.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chang. Again, this is a theme that's come up over and over again tonight. If we could try to stay focused. You started out well, Mr. Gill, by saying what the amendment was, and that's what we're going to be talking about, which is more than I can say about some other people who spoke tonight. But if we could try to keep it focused, we'd all be grateful. Thank you.
We had it working.
I'll take your advice as a consideration, but let me finish. So
So this is my beavers.
Speaking as well. So I would say one thing. Legislation does not exist in a vacuum. It operates within a culture, and right now that culture is increasingly hostile to dissent. That is why we as a conservative insist on clarity. When laws are vague, enforcements become subjective. When enforcements become subjective, freedoms become conditional. This amendment says plainly expressing beliefs, even strong ones, even comfortable ones, is not a crime. And preaching a faith-based view is not criminal mischief. Peaceful protest is not intimidation. And I cede my time now. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gill. Okay, Mr. Bexley.
Thank you, Chair, very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'm not a regular member at this committee. But
7 days left of this drought.
I appreciate the ability to exercise my privilege.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you to the witnesses for bearing this out tonight and keeping your attention wrapped. And I'll do some work here to see if we can engage you in this process. I want to make it very clear that I want to talk to the committee today about Bill C-9, and which, if passed with Amendment BQ3 alone, would strip away longstanding protections for freedom of expression and religious liberty in this country. You know, this goes directly to supporting the amendment by my colleague Andrew Lawton in this latest amendment. This bill represents the most significant assault on Canadians' ability to speak openly about their faith, perhaps since the Charter was written. And it comes in an especially telling moment. And I can't tell if this is ironic or disturbing or deliberate or accidental. But during the Advent season, and at a time when Christians reflect on Scripture,
yes,
the coming of Christ,
yeah, they intentionally planned this for the Advent season.
The previous Liberal Justice Committee chair declaring that parts of the Bible and the Torah
Sure.
clear hatred. He singled out Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Romans, and that is not a random commentator. That was the individual responsible for overseeing the Justice
Oh, that
Committee,
is MP
and
Bext.
just last week, he was promoted to cabinet as the minister responsible for Canadian identity and culture. Only this Liberal government would reward someone for asserting, essentially, that God himself is hateful. I would encourage the new minister to revisit the preamble of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which affirms that Canada is founded upon principles recognizing the supremacy of God and the rule of law, as well as our national anthem, that God keep our land glorious and free. The Liberal government frequently boasts about defending the Charter, yet they conveniently ignore the Charter's protections for freedom of religion and expression, as well as its own explicit acknowledgement of God in the preamble and the national anthem. This hypocrisy is the backdrop of everything in Bill C-9. At the center of this bill is a political deal between the Liberals and the Bloc Québécois. In exchange for the Bloc's support, the Liberals have agreed to eliminate long-standing criminal code safeguards, namely sections 3193B, 319.3.1b, that protect Canadians from being prosecuted for, in good faith, expressing an argument on a religious subject or belief rooted in sacred text. These protections are not loopholes. They are constitutional guardrails upheld by the Supreme Court and ensuring that Canada's hate speech provisions remain consistent within the Charter. My colleagues before me have gone to great lengths and with great eloquence, far more eloquence than I could muster, to express this point quite poignantly. But the Liberals in the Bloc want to tear these protections out by the roots. The Bloc justifies this change by referencing a single case. Montreal Imam Adil Shakouri Imam, who in 2023 used a prayer to call for the extermination of Jews. This is abhorrent. His statements were vile and deeply anti-Semitic. But the simple truth is that what he said was already illegal. Illegal under Section 318 for advocating genocide and under 3191 for public incitement of hatred. This is another example of the government failing to act and failing to execute on laws that already exist on the books in the protection of Canadians and their fundamental rights. The religious text defense does not apply to either provision, and there is absolutely no evidence prosecutors declined to charge him because of that defense. The only reason he was not charged is because authorities failed to enforce the law. This is unbelievable. Instead of fixing that enforcement gap, the Liberals and the Bloc have chosen to target law-abiding religious Canadians. That is hypocrisy of the highest order.
Hypocrisy.
Especially as they claim this bill is meant to protect the very communities it will deeply wound.
I ask unanimous consent
Government has repeatedly marginalized
that this House of Commons declare
they've attempted to strip charitable status from religious charities.
Jesus a dickhead.
Pro-life organizations. They impose
That'll go over well. I'm sure no one will have an issue with that.
punishing groups that refuse to renounce their core religious beliefs. And this is unbelievable and unconscionable. I will note that this ideological overreach is not new. In fact, in an early 2022 report from an advisory panel to the Department of National Defense recommended that Canadian Armed Forces not employ chaplains whose religious traditions do not align with the government's ever-shifting vision of equality and inclusion. And this panel singled out the entire Abrahamic faith traditions. Those traditions that reserve priesthood for men and those that believe in the traditional view of marriage as being incompatible with serving in the military. Think about that. Really, we need as legislators to think about this. That a government that claims to champion diversity and inclusion was actively entertaining the exclusion of religious Canadians from serving as chaplains precisely because of their beliefs. Shameful. This is not tolerance, it is blatant liberal double standard. Diversity is celebrated only when it mirrors the government's ideology, and the Charter of Rights millions of Canadians are dismissed as an inconvenience. Now, Bill C-9 directly targets their freedom of expression. Yet the Liberals still claim to be the party of the Charter, even as they systematically attack the very freedoms the Charter guarantees. And we're getting close to the part where we engage the witnesses.
Oh, good.
Witnesses who appeared before Justice Committee
Glad he hasn't forgot about them.
claim entirely. Numerous constitutional experts explained that the religious text defense is narrow, specific, and constitutionally necessary. It is not a blanket protection. It applies only to good faith expressions of sincerely held religious belief, not to violence, not to incitement, not to hatred. The courts have been clear on this point for decades. But Liberals now believe they know better than the constitutional jurisprudence and better than every witness who testified before them. Their ideological agenda matters more than evidence or constitutional balance. If C-9 passes, the consequences will be severe. And I have a question for Liberal and Bloc members of this committee. Would a priest reading the scheduled Sunday Mass, a reading set years in advance, face persecution or prosecution if the passage is deemed offensive?
No.
Would a rabbi teaching Torah commentary, a Muslim parent quoting the Quran to explain moral teaching, could a Sikh, a Hindu, or a Buddhist teachers be targeted simply for articulating traditional beliefs? Any person of
Just
faith
yelling no
quoting their
to
sacred
ruin
texts
his
to face up to 2 years in prison if the government or a prosecutor finds their belief objectionable.
I don't think it's just objectionable is
In a country
the
like
issue.
Canada, home to such rich religious diversity, this is chilling. A free society debates and engages. It does not imprison people for sincerely held religious convictions. The Liberals insist their bill protects religious Canadians from hate, while simultaneously displaying a deep disdain for religious communities who express views different from their own, and this contradiction is staggering. Let us also remember the historical context the Liberals prefer to ignore. It was a Conservative government led by John Diefenbaker that first enshrined these fundamental freedoms into Canadian law through the Bill of Rights. The very criminal code the Liberals
Interesting
are
that
rewriting
connects
was
even if
drafted
the
by Sir
building's
John
not complete.
Thompson,
That's interesting.
a devout Catholic and Conservative Prime Minister who understood that criminal law must restrain real harm, not police belief
Oh,
or
no,
censor
it's not.
sacred texts.
It's just because the windmills are going.
He even initially declined to become Prime Minister due to the intense sectarian hatred of his time after converting to the Catholic faith. But today's Liberals lecture Canadians about rights while gutting the rights that Conservatives and historically even Liberals worked hard to establish and protect. Removing the religious expression safeguard in Section 319 will not make Canadians safer. It will not stop real hate. Genuine incitement and advocacy of genocide are already illegal, will remain illegal, and must be prosecuted by the system that already exists. This bill will succeed in one area, though. It will expose millions of peaceful, law-abiding people of faith to criminal prosecution simply for quoting scripture or expressing long-held religious convictions. This is chilling. That is not who Canada is supposed to be. It is not constitutional, it is not just, and it is not worthy of a free society. I urge every member of this committee to accept the amendment from my learned colleague and defend the freedoms of religion, expression, and conscience that form the foundation of our democracy. The Liberals may have forgotten these principles, but Canadians haven't. And I have one question for the witnesses. That if passed in this restrictive form right now, the government has made, and the government side and the Liberals and the Bloc have made great statements to the fact that it doesn't matter, right? That the charter exists, that there won't be prosecutions. But could the government use the notwithstanding clause to maintain enforcement, even though we have been assured that we
Oh my
need
God,
not
the
worry
notwithstanding
about this infringement
clause.
because of freedoms found in the charter? And I would love to hear a comment from all three of you.
All right, almost made it through this.
Thank you for the question, Chair. So I can speak generally to the requirements of Section 33 of the Charter, which is that
I read the.
a declaration
Wait, sorry.
made must be done.
From Spioni. I read the translation of Charcouy. Oh, that's how you spell it. Charcoui's statement that started all this. He asked God to take care of Zionists, then, oh God, make sure none remains, no matter what he meant. Language is ambiguous enough that it's not necessarily Israelis, Jewish people he talks about. Yeah, I think that was the, like, there was just, it was vague enough that there was no real identifiable group. It just says, I think he said that, like, the enemies of Palestine, which you can interpret as meaning Israelis, but that can also mean a bunch of other things. So I think, I think it was like, it wasn't really specifically targeted to any one identifiable group enough
Expressly by the legislature
to be prosecuted
under the
as such.
section, in order to have the effect that such operation of the charter rights would not apply, but for that the declaration must be done expressly would apply for only Section 7 2, 7 to 15 of the Charter, and would apply only for 5 years. So it's understanding that the federal government has never invoked the notwithstanding clause, but those are the requirements of form in terms of the declaration needing to be specific by the legislature.
I don't have anything to add to what my colleague Ms. Ali has said on the scope of Section 33 of the Charter. I don't know if there was another question.
It was the same question. All witnesses, you know, that could the notwithstanding clause be used to defend C-9 in its current form prior to the amendment from my colleague across the way?
Yeah, that's funny. It's like,
if it was struck down by the court.
there's people who really don't like this bill, but are like, but I'd be cool with this if this amendment was just its own bill to get rid of the religious exemption.
I understand that.
And then there's a bunch of people who support the bill but are really against removing the religious exemption.
Constitutional by the court. Could the government use the notwithstanding clause to maintain enforcement?
We're here to speak tonight about what is in C-9 and the impact of the amendments that are before the committee, but not to opine on what would happen, what the government might do in a situation where a law is struck down. That is not the role of a Justice Department official, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. At least I got you speaking, right? So I appreciate that. I want to close a little bit with some commentary that I've been contacted by numerous faith leaders in my riding over the previous few days. And I find it very hard to express how deep.
No, not polls, but just from like that's just anecdotally from like the people I've spoken to about the bill. Obviously, there are people who are in favor of the bill and the amendment, including obviously the Liberals now. Oh, God damn it.
Proceeding here. And then he went and sat down, and I noticed someone from the Liberal staff team went up to the individual and asked him, I'm assuming asked him to delete it, although I did not hear that. That individual has now left the room. I had to Google him to find out who he is, and I believe it was John Paul Danko, who is a member of Parliament, and that individual has now left the room. It was quite obvious to me that he was holding his cell phone sideways, right here at this angle of the table. And so I just want to make sure, Chair, that you would investigate this and ensure that photo was in fact deleted. I would hate to see it on social media, and knowing that this was a member of Parliament that did it is deeply concerning because that is against our rules. So I just wonder if you would investigate that and report back.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. I wasn't aware that it is not allowed. It may have happened.
What is going on, guys? Why are we doing fucking Instagram photos?
I will look into it. I'll find out about it. If it did, in fact, happen, I'll make sure the picture's deleted.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Secondly, I do have a copy of Mr. Lawton's amendment here, so I just want to make sure I'm going to stay as best I can on topic to that, Chair. Listen, I have been astounded by the debate since Bill C-9 was introduced, and just the general direction that the Liberal government has decided to go on this. Like, as a relatively new member of Parliament, you know, I don't speak loudly about faith often, or my faith in particular, but I certainly, you know, am a person of faith, and the outpouring of deep concern regarding this bill has been, well, I haven't seen anything quite like it since I was elected, certainly, and you know, some of the most you know, different faiths are more politically active than others, I would say, and that's okay. That's their right to certainly participate in that, in politics or in commentary on the issues of the day. But we've got a joint statement here, Chair, and I'm not sure if the committee's received it, signed by a number of multi-faith organization and civil liberties organizations. It was dated December 1st, And it is certainly calling for, I could read the whole thing. We, the undersigned multi-faith civil liberties and community organizations, collectively reject Bill C-9, an act to amend the criminal code, the so-called Combating Hate Act. They further write, as Bill C-9 proceeds through the parliamentary process, we emphasize that this bill shouldn't be passed. The risks it poses to protest rights, labor rights, and public accountability are too serious and too far-reaching. Bill C-9 far.
So wait, are you for or against the Palestinian protest? The Palestinian protest or not?
Dissent and expands
Pick. You gotta pick one.
Discretionary power at a time when over-policing, surveillance, and disproportionate targeting of racialized communities are already well documented. They also, our demands, with number one, withdraw Bill C-9 in its entirety, number one. Number two, affirm the right to protest as a cornerstone of Canadian democracy. Number three, end the expansion of police powers and
that's basically how every other fight he's done has gone, hasn't it? So it's sort of like he's won by decision.
And number four, commit to evidence-based approaches to addressing hate. It goes on and on for some time. It's two full pages there. I won't read the whole thing, Chair, I promise. But the reason why this really stood out to me, I was raised in the United Church of Canada. Some of my
here we go. We're about to get water
Christians like to call us Christian light, affectionately. Sometimes it's affectionate, sometimes it isn't, and that's okay. We take that quite well as members of the United Church in this country, based on, of course, the Methodist faith. And we don't, the United Church of Canada is like one of the most center-left politics. And they weigh into politics all the time as a central organization for the church, always supporting liberals.
Here comes the water.
Sometimes even
Thank
going
God.
further to the left of the spectrum of that. And I often have debates with people within my own church community and our faith leadership about why our church chooses to be so public about their political views and why they're always with the liberals and not on the left. Even they, Mr. Chair, have signed this statement asking for this bill to be pulled out. It's that bad that, the liberals have even managed to tick off us nice folks in the United Church. I don't understand how the Liberal Party could be so off base with this bill that they have lost their biggest advocate in the faith community, which is, in fact, the leadership of my own church. Part of the foundational principle of our church under John Wesley is, the famous quote, now made famous by Hillary Clinton, something that won't endear me to my conservative colleagues on her election campaign for president in 2016, but who could say no to Morgan Freeman's voice, is do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, for all the people you can, as long as ever you can. And yet, even the United Church is saying this is not the right path to do that, folks. You need to pull this bill back and have a sit-down. Have a sit-down with the Center for Free Expression, the Independent Jewish Voices, the Canadian Muslim Public Affairs Council.
Conservative MP citing Independent Jewish Voices. I never thought I'd see the day.
Canadian National Council Toronto chapter. It goes on and on. The signatories to this statement saying that this bill is an abject failure. It's a total disaster. And these are people with very different political views on every topic that matters, except for this one. Here they agree that this and their faiths are all at risk by this piece of legislation that has been made worse tonight by the Bloc Liberal Separatist Coalition. And I really have a hard time, I'm going to have a really hard time going home and justifying to my constituents in rural Manitoba how this is supposed to make their life better. I really don't see it, because you've got all the experts saying that this is in fact going to make life much, much worse. And, you know,
No, yeah, this is, we're through the looking glass on this one. It's great.
this is going to achieve.
I love this
I've heard
amendment
from the
now.
experts. I'm filling in for Mr. Baber now. I was here before that. They've already admitted on the record that all the serious crimes that can be done and have been done are already a crime. It's already criminal to incite violence against a criminal. It's already in the criminal code to incite violence against another religious group based on their religion, as well as any other matter of factors. When
Can
you're
this
trying
little
to incite
lake fill up
violence
already?
against a particular group in this country.
I would like some
And
water
so
flow
what
soon.
exactly does this achieve? I've yet to hear an answer. You know, we had some Liberal members trying to answer questions when they, of course, didn't have to be on the record about it. I don't know. Anybody want to answer that question? Like, how is this actually going to make it better than what's already illegal to do
All
in
right,
this
there we
country?
go.
We are talking about another amendment, an amendment that's supposed to protect people, right, from the impact of this bill, which is an overreach. So I'll move on, Mr. Chair, but I am deeply concerned about that. You know, I think there are people in this country, there are a few still left, although they're getting fewer, that went, you know, in the course of a world war and in peacekeeping missions, and they fought to defend these freedoms that this country stands for and that our allies around the world stand for. Freedom to believe what you want to believe and to believe in any religion and any faith. You know, my grandfather's a Second World War veteran. He left the farm in Margaret, Manitoba, population 100, and went to fight for freedoms against hateful people. So it's not that conservatives are opposed to this bill because we're all of a sudden wanting hateful acts and hateful language to continue to get spread all over this country. Like that's exactly the opposite of what we believe. And you know, I think the vast majority of my constituents would expect me, though, to be here standing up for their freedom to believe what they want to believe, and that they and generations before us from our region have put their lives on the line to defend that, not just in
Why
this
isn't it
country,
not
but
flowing
around the world
into there?
for religions that they didn't even know or understand at the time that they were getting on a boat and shipping over there. And so for this now, you know, it's shocking to me that we have a group that wants to, you know, remove these types of freedoms and protections in our society. I think Mr. Lawton has an important amendment here that really is trying to at least balance what is happening. And you know, I think Mr. Baber and Ms. Cronus also brought important context to light when they were sharing their deep legal understanding of the law, being
Oh, it's
both
because that's
practitioners
at
of it
70,
themselves.
this is at
Of course,
75.
our shadow
That's why.
Mr. Brock as well. These are folks that understand this deeply, and I think probably more deeply than maybe even some of the Liberal members. But I digress, Mr. Chair. I really do want to stress the fact that Manitobans understand standing up against hateful acts. We've seen challenges with, you know, ethnic communities in Winnipeg being targeted by hateful acts, particularly with the rise of the conflict in the Middle East, hateful protests outside the Jewish Folklorama Pavilion, where people take their kids to celebrate faith. I mean, Manitobans are not strangers or isolated from
Didn't you just cite
these activities
probably the group that was hosting that protest, Jewish Voice for Priests?
We see them.
Shouldn't we be listening? That's why this is such a wild spot for this debate to be at.
In Canadian statutes and in Canadian law, we have a problem with enforcement in this country, which, you know, is a problem that stems across many different types of crimes, thanks to Liberal government over the last 10 years. And this is just another example of a failure to enforce and prosecute existing laws that already exist. So I would encourage the Liberals to pull back on this bill, abandon their partnership with the Bloc, which shouldn't really have to be said, but apparently it does in this context, and rethink this, because, you know, I think we really need to make sure that this country, by the way, the generation that fought for these freedoms in other countries came back after the Great Wars and said, we need to solve this problem on our own. Like, we need to make sure that these things that we just went and fought a war over to protect can't happen here, which is why you got the Bill of Rights, like a colleague mentioned, and why the Charter was patriated, and it came back to Canada, and all of these provisions were added to protect the freedoms that Canadians deserve, and they were brought here onto Canadian soil and into Canadian law. I don't understand why the Liberals are trying to find a problem where none exists. We have a lot of problems facing this country, as I have learned very quickly since getting elected to the federal level. There are a lot of challenges, but the state policing the religious beliefs of its people, like, that's something that we leave to, well, other countries around the world, some of which the new Prime Minister seemingly gets along very well with and spends a lot of time flying around the world to see and discuss with, and maybe there's some commonalities there, I don't know. I'll leave that up to him to justify to his constituents in Nepean and across the rest of the country. But the fact is that those principles have no place here. They don't belong in this country, and that's why Mr. Lawton's amendment should pass, because it really does strengthen a terrible act, but it makes some improvement in as limited a fashion as is possible, given the deeply flawed nature of the original draft. You know, I think it's heartening to see that at least within our Conservative team, which is made up of members of Parliament from many faiths, of which many are around this table, and many of which I am proud and pleased to serve in this Parliament with, that we are at least unified.
It's too much water.
That we represent, that where the Liberals are going with this, what they're proposing to do with it is wrong, and that Canadians will not stand for it. And so I appreciate, Chair, that you've mentioned that there's resources to discuss this further for the rest of the week. I think that's important, because Canadians have a lot of concerns. There's a lot of views to share. I have gotten, literally, this is like the first, you know, discussion point publicly that I've had hundreds of calls on from people from Brandon's longest religions. First Baptist Church just celebrated their 140th anniversary in the city, to members of the community who just opened the very first Gurdwara in Brandon's history just earlier this year. And unified, they are reaching out to me with deep, deep concern and fear, suggesting that this bill in fact reflects bills that came into force in countries that they purposefully fled to Canada to avoid. And now they're seeing it reflected here in the Canadian Parliament.
Start making
and so
some
to my Liberal colleagues, I will end with this and reprieve the committee of further Grant Jackson interventions for now. But well, thank you, colleagues. It's very, you know, I appreciate it. Flattering. Deeply flattering. I noticed the chair didn't join in. You know, maybe next time I'll try harder, Chair.
I smiled.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that very much. So, you know, to my Liberal colleagues, I ask that, given everything that's going on in this country, for young people, for seniors, for actual criminals and actual victims of crime, can we not take a reprieve from this bill and get on with the business of locking up criminals, of bringing safety back to our streets that is not being infringed upon by preachers and other religious figures and just general people trying to get an understanding of faith? Can we not get back to dealing with real criminals, to lock people up, bring back safety to our streets? Let's put the people of this country first, do all the good we can for as many people we can, as quickly as we can. And I am sure that this committee will still be here to deal with this ridiculous bill when we have achieved some actual results to make communities safer in this country. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. I'm going to suspend for 5 minutes, and then we're going to come back.
Oh, goody, goody, goody. More suspensions.